This song, We Are Family, it means so much to me more than ever now.
Yeah.
And to be the voice on that is everything. Nile and I to this day laugh about this. I was this goofy 15 at the time, going into 16 kid that would ask him like every other day, do you think they're going to play the record? Just keep on doing what you're doing to me.
Stars, cars, guitars.
Hello, Kathy Sledge.
Hello, Alex. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
You must remember this. I reckon this is your first performance on Soul Train. Can you see that?
I do indeed. I remember those outfits.
Yeah, the dungarees. And you were absolutely... There's a few things I wanted to say about this clip. First of all, you are absolutely owning it. And it's like your record company has said, we want a female Jackson 5, and you were the Michael Jackson of Sister Sledge. Would there be some truth in that?
That I was actually, my sisters and I was referenced as the Michael. Definitely, the early days, we were the answer to the Jackson 5. And we really were sisters, they're brothers. So we actually did a tour with the Jacksons. And I got a chance to share the stage with Michael. And we went on our tour buses and followed each other on our buses. But it was very exciting and a very exciting part of my life, chapter in my life. And definitely that Soul Train clip. I like when those things kind of surface now because I don't think people realize how young I was when I started singing.
Yeah, I mean, you look about, 13 or 14 there, but very cute.
It was. I always go by whatever song I'm singing. I know how old I was. But I do know I sang We Are Family, which changed our success here in the United States. I sang that when I was 16.
Wow. So were you, usually if you've got siblings in a band, there are pushy showbiz parents behind them. In many cases, the parents are quite pushy. Was that the situation for you and your sisters?
Actually, no, not with my mom. My mom actually, and my father, and a lot of people don't know this, I didn't grow up with my dad, but he was one of the first African Americans to break the barriers as a dancer on Broadway. He danced in Kiss Me Kate, and he performed in Kiss Me Kate. So he actually, if you Google Fred and Sledge, he really broke the color barriers in the early days. And I'm very proud of that. So entertainment and music and the arts was always in our bloodline. My mother, I think, God bless her, I think she did the best. She was, raising 5 girls, and she took us to the height of the potential of our music career by herself. And then later we had other management people come in, but she had a lot of discernment. So I never felt like she was a pushy backstage mom. I do feel like she was very discerning and she was very protective. And I get it, because I think I would be too, having 5 girls and raising them yourself in the industry.
We've not talked about your sisters. I've never really spoken to you about your sisters before, because I felt as a fan that you were the driving force to Sister Sledge. And that may be a little unfair on your sister, but when we watched that clip, that very short clip of you for the first time ever on Soul Train, the camera was on you all the time. There were a couple of cutaways to the sisters. Did that end up causing jealousy? It wasn't your fault the cameras were always looking at you. You were the lead singer, and that does tend to happen with the person who's out front. But did it cause jealousy?
Sure, it did. Later in life, I realized it much more. But I think like one thing we would do this, I would do it a lot. If you look at some of the later videos, like early on, I started learning how to work with a camera. I would sing a song and then maybe walk over to a sister and sing to her. And the camera would get a really good shot of her. And then I'd go over to another sister and sing to her. And the camera would, and that was something that we used to do. We used to start, because you're right. The cameras would always focus on the lead singer, focus on the Diana Ross. And what I started to learn, and actually Joni was one of the sisters because she took radio, television, and film all through college. And she would always say, make sure you come over to me. when we were singing. And it was smart because when Sister Sledge was at its highest, when the group was at its highest peak, where there were lots of videos weren't as popular, but we did lots and loads of television shows. And I think because of going close to the sister and making sure the camera would pull in and do a great close-up of each sister, it helped with the notoriety of each sister too. It helped with our image. It helped with knowing us a little more, because this was, of course, before videos. And then later, of course, I think the biggest frustration was singing, I think to my sisters, was when I became a signature voice. It became, and I didn't realize it then, but I realized it later in life that it was a problem to them that I was a signature voice.
Yeah, sure. And that's because you had easily the best voice. I mean, you had this kind of sexy raspness in your voice as well. Just a hint of a rasp in your voice, which made it very endearing. And I guess that, if I was producing your records, I'd say, well, no, let's get Kathy on that one.
To me, it's just like my voice. I'm like, it's raspy. But I always love when people say that. I never knew. And now, of course, I do. I remember having a conversation with Jeffrey Osborne. And talk about a distinctive voice. And I remember saying, my voice isn't that distinctive. And he goes, neither is mine. And I'm like, okay, it's us. Because your voice is very distinctive. I don't even know if you would remember that conversation, but I surely do. And I think when it's your voice, it's just your voice, So I appreciate it now, and I get it now. And now I embrace when people say that my voice is special.
Well, it is. It's one of the best soul voices I've ever heard. And I think that a lot of people watching this and listening, Kathy, will agree. And that's why we are still playing not only The Greatest Dancer and We Are Family, but there's also, of course, Thinking of You and All American Girls. And on the radio the other night, I opened up my show with Got to Love Somebody, and it sounded amazing.
Thank you. That was a fun song.
We could play the name game. Right, so let's just do this.
Okay.
Stevie
Wonder. Stevie Wonder, when I was I did a tour once in Australia, and it was the longest tour ever. I was headlining a play called Gotta Dance. It was a lot of fun, but near the end, I was very homesick. And Stevie Wonder, no matter who I would call to reach out to my friends, he would always call me back. He got me through that tour. And we would do sometimes, the accents on the phone. He was just one of the warmest, nicest, most down-to-earth people you will ever know. And not to mention, I feel like we're living in the time we are literally living in the time of a genius amongst us, another Mozart or Brahms or Bach, and Stevie Wonder falls into that. To me,
yeah,
they're going to be talking about him when they're not talking about anyone else. How we still talk about Mozart.
An absolute genius. Okay, the next one on the name game.
I like this.
Marvin.
Oh my gosh, Gaye. Marvin Gaye. My Marvin Gaye story. We were performing. First of all, gotta say this. I realize it now, but I was a kid then when we were opening for Marvin Gaye at Radio City Music Hall in New York. And talk about one of the smoothest, coolest guys. Of course, I was a goofy kid, but yeah, he's got to be like one of the most coolest person ever. We were performing, but here's a funny Marvin Gaye story. We were performing, opening at Radio City Music Hall, and there was this stage that would elevate up slowly, and we would open with Lost in Music with all this smoke, and we would come up and we were frozen, and then we'd break into, we're lost in music, and the smoke, and it was very theatrical. And then the next night, we weren't allowed to use the riser. And here comes Marvin Gaye coming up slow, singing a cool song when he opened. And I was like, oh, that's why we can't use the Right. But that happens in showbiz. I didn't feel any type of way about it. He's Marvin Gaye. What I remember of him, that's just the first word that comes to mind, cool. He was a very cool guy.
Yeah. You toured with him, Michael,
heartstrings. Michael had to be one of the nicest people you would have ever met. I will say very naive, but pure. That's the first word that comes to mind. Pure heart. Don't believe any of the nonsense that I ever heard, because I do believe that, but I do believe that he was very naive. I do believe that he probably did have pajama parties, okay, and think nothing of it. But you have to think about it. Where Michael's life stopped is where it started. I remember once, in other words, where was he, 7 years old? And that's probably what he related to most, because that's when it got abnormal. That's when life was normal for him, up to 7 years old, if that was, if it may be younger. So he probably really could relate to a younger. And I remember once seeing an interview with Michael Jackson. It was with Barbara Walters. It was years ago, but it makes sense now. And she asked him, what was it like to be Michael Jackson? And he said, sometimes, and he was a kid, sometimes it feels like you're an animal in a cage. And to me, that explains his affinity to animals. He could relate to them. And then he said, sometimes it just makes him want to put on a mask. And near the end, it seems like that's what he ended up doing. And his whole facade became, a different face. And I remember watching his memorial, and his brother Marlon spoke, and his brother said one day, I don't know if you've ever seen this before or heard it, but he said Marlon said one day, Marlon was in a record store, and he saw this older man there, like looking through all the LPs, very old guy. And he walked over to the old guy, and he whispered in the old guy's ear, "Hi, Mike." And Michael said, "How did you know it was me?" And he said, "I recognize those shoes anywhere." And the whole place fell out laughing. This was at Michael's memorial, but the sad thing was, he said, that sounds funny, but the truth is that is what it was like being his brother. He said Michael would have to literally go and get total theatrical looks in order to have normalcy, in order to go out and have a regular life. He would have to change a total made over look by professional makeup artist. And then I do believe I read once Jay-Z was having dinner once in a restaurant in New York. And a bunch of fans came over and got his autograph and, Jay-Z's autograph. And then when the fans walked away, he turned to the person he was having dinner with and said, if they only knew who I was having dinner with. So evidently, this is what Michael would do. At the time when I toured with him, he didn't have to do that as much. He just put out his Rock With You album and Off the Wall album. Mm. And so I got a chance to do things like we would always eat at truck stops because the truckers didn't care who you were and they had good food. But the brothers and the sisters, my sisters and I, we would always do our road trip in our buses, and we would always eat at the places where we would have more of a normal life. And one thing I remember most about Michael, the first word that comes to mind is joy. He was a joyful person and heartfelt. And if you think about it, when Stevie Wonder sang at Michael's memorial, he cried like a baby. That's the first time I've ever seen Stevie cry that way. And if you think about it, all Stevie Wonder saw, honestly, was Michael's heart. That's what he always.
Sure.
Big heart. Big heart.
Jeffrey Daniel from Shalimar told me he'd done Soul Train, and Second Time Around was a hot single. And he went to, I think it was Studio 54, and was introduced to Michael Jackson. And he couldn't believe it when Michael Jackson said, "Oh, I know you. I've seen you." And he started singing second time around. He said it was so cool. Did he ever say to you he liked your songs? Do you remember him saying, "I like Mama Never Told Me"? Or can you remember anything like that?
I tell you what I can remember, which is so ironic you bring this question up, because someone just texted me last night, a friend that I met through the music business, and he goes, "I want you to look at this clip with Michael and Diana Ross, and they're dancing on stage and having a great time." He says, "But look very closely." And there he is in a Sister Sledge t-shirt. And I'm like, how cool is that? I have to post that. Isn't that, I know. And he said, "I've seen this clip a million times." And I said, "I've seen this too." He goes, "But did you really look at it?" And so I do know that he was a fan of our music. I do know that if we knew then what we know now, there would have been so many different kinds of conversations. I remember one vividly. I was 17 and I was moving out of my house. I was going on 18. And I remember I would always buy different things. On my bus, I would load it up from lampshades to dishes to pots and pans because I was getting my own place. And I remember once stopping at a truck stop and I was buying some dishes, and it was a very good buy. And I told the guys, "Yo, this is like for $19, a 20-piece set. This is a good buy. Does anyone want any dishes?" And they were laughing at me. And they didn't want any, of course. And they all went into the truck stop restaurant to eat. But Michael stayed behind, and he was still laughing until he was crying. I thought this was funny. And then he says, "Why are you buying those?" And I said, "Because I'm moving in my own place." And mind you, I was a couple of years younger than him, a year or so. And then the laughter stopped, and he got very serious, as if he was looking through me. And he said, "Why are you moving in your own place?" Then I didn't know how to answer that question. I just said, "Because, that was my answer, But now I understand, and I learned this about him later in life, that he would vicariously live through you. Now I would have answered it. I would have said, well, when you live in your own place at the age that we are, you get to have your own space. You get to have a cup of tea, and you can leave that cup and saucer there, and it's still there when you come back, and it's yours, and you can close the door from the world, and you can, those are probably some of the things I would have brought up, because I realize now he really wanted to know. It got very serious. He was like, "Why do you want it?" And what he wanted you to explain to him is, what is that feeling? Because I don't know that feeling. I don't understand it. I want you to explain it to me. What does it feel like to want to move in your own place? And I learned that different colleagues would always share. I think he asked, right before he adopted children, he asked Gladys Knight, "What is it like to have kids?" He wanted you to explain it because he never got a chance to live it. And he really wanted you to describe the feeling, which is really interesting.
Kathy, I'm itching to talk to you about thinking of you. I know you and I have had the conversation about thinking of you about a dozen times already in the past, but Luther Vandross was backing David Bowie on Young Americans in '75, and then just 2 or 3 years later, he's on We Are Family, isn't he?
He's on everything. He's on Greatest Dancer and Thinking of You and Family. He was the sound. And Nile, Rodgers, and Bernard Edwards had a sound between Fonzie Thornton and Luther Vandross, of course, Lucy Martin, Alpha Anderson, and sometimes I think, that was pretty much it. Norma Jean Wright as well. But they had this sound, and they did not want to deviate much from that sound. So if you listen to a song like Good Times is hard, and then you play We Are Family, it's the same formula. And they would use their singers and their sound. And I am blessed to be able to say that I was under the same studio roof with a Luther Vandross and some of the other artists I mentioned. But I remember Luther. Clearly, I remember him once listening to the playback. This is, of course, before he was Luther, Mm-hmm. And he was very quiet and great guy. He was the kind of guy who loved to make jokes and laugh hard, And he was leaning and he was listening into the track of the playback. But something about him this day seemed a little sad. He was just listening. And now I get it. Here I am as the 16-year-old artist, and he's doing background on my record. And he was like, honestly, I am the hugest Luther fan. I mean, his voice is golden still. And I can imagine, and I've seen that movie before too, as an artist, sometimes we feel like we want to be so much farther on. And only in God's time you get to be where where that rightful place. And a voice like Luther and a talent like Luther, I can't even imagine him doing background on anyone's record. So maybe what I picked up was a sense of frustration. But, I'm honored to be able to say that he collaborated on some projects that I sang on.
Absolutely. And he, of course, had done the backing vocals, like we said, and then he went on to be the vocalist with Change and Barnet Boogie, but he never really got a credit on the label. And then, of course, it all came full
circle,
Yeah.
And you can only imagine what that man would do with his voice is unbelievable. Same with Whitney Houston. Sometimes we get these once in a lifetime singers. And Luther, to me, will always be one of them.
Yeah, he was just amazing. And his music is forever. Look, I need to talk to you about Thinking of You. And the reason is, I as I've told you before, in 1979, I never used to write letters. Letters were like school for me. And I was 16, but I wrote to Atlantic Records. And I pleaded with them to flip over Lost in Music because Thinking of You was on the other side. Now, I know I've told you that loads of times before.
I forgot about that, but you're right. How could that ever be a B-side?
I know, crazy. But that line, you melted my heart with one line in that song. Do you know what that line is?
I would like to try to guess. You got to help me.
Okay, it's at the end of the song when you just sing out, just keep on doing what you're doing to me. That, for me, was the money shot for that song.
Wow. Really? Just keep on doing what you're doing to me. Thank you.
That is exactly what I wanted you to do, Kathy, because because of copyright reasons, we can't play clips on here. And that song was just amazing. It was tender, it was sexy, it was disco, it wasn't too fast, it was classy. What a song. And that's your favorite song to perform?
That is my absolute favorite song to perform. And sometimes I love it when, everyone just sings the lyrics. And I'm like, I think the hashtag that I always use when I post that song or at a concert is sing this with me. And at the beginning of every time I perform Thinking of You, I go, sing this with me, and it's when you just hear everyone sing every lyric. It's a beautiful song, and I think I've always loved Thinking of You, but talk about having a second life with that song. I'm feeling it here. And in fact, my daughter, Kristen, and I, we have our talk show, Family Room here. And her friends now text her and they're like, your mom's got this new record out. I really love it. It's called Thinking of You. And I love when I hear that because I'm like, wow, okay. It's going to be here.
There's so many questions I want to ask you, Kathy, and I thought of a brilliant question for you today, right? It's the only one I kind of pre-thought of. And I thought, had it not all gone wrong for Chic? I mean, I think they rushed into the charts with Good Times and it went to number one. And I'm sure I've heard Nile Rodgers say, after the disco sucks, it was all over. And of course, around about the same time, they had produced Sister Sledge. And then I suppose they thought, well, we want to do more production. And you guys went off to work with Narada and Michael Walden. Had you had stayed with Chic, would you have had, this is a brilliant question, would you have had on your next album as your first single, Upside Down, which went to Diana Ross?
That's an excellent question. I don't think so. I think that from what I know, the late Bernard Edwards, and Nile Rodgers, who's a good friend. I keep in touch with Nile frequently. Is that it was just the genius in them. You know, if you hear the story about I'm coming out, I don't know if Nile ever told you that story, but I'm sure he will be on your show one day. I'll give you a little hint, a heads up. But he tells a story about how at the time he was at a club, and there were a lot of cross-dressers dressing as Diana Ross. And he went in the bathroom, and it was a gay club, and everyone was just as when Diana was at her hottest. Everyone. He said he must have seen at least 3 or 4 Diana Rosses because, you know, she is the diva. And that's where he got the idea. He said, you know, it's better in his words. But I heard him tell the story, and he talks about how he called up Bernard, and he's like, I got the perfect song for Diana. I'm coming out. You know, so what I've learned about Nile and Bernard, it's probably the same thing with Upside Down. They would tailor, same thing with We Are Family. They wrote that about the description of my sisters and myself. So I think they really would go into detail with their artist. One little inside trivia is our record was I Want Your Love, and their record was Greatest Dancer. And they were writing at the same time. And they flipped it. They gave us Greatest Dancer. And if you listen closely to I Want Your Love, the bridge, you know, when it goes, you're all I need, that's my sisters and myself, because we had done the background to that song because it was slated for our album. And then they decided, nah, you know, you guys do Greatest Dancer. But that was Nile and Bernard. They were very, I think they really poured into their artist, and they would tailor, write, and work around the artist. And they were some of the most respected and hardest working musicians and producers I've ever worked with.
Wow, that's amazing. That is a really, really great to hear that story. Did you want I Want Your Love? When they took it away from you, I mean, mind you, He's the Greatest Dancer was a bigger hit than I Want Your Love, but did you think, oh, we wanted that?
I think they had an idea of what they were doing when they gave us Greatest Dancer. They probably thought about it, and they felt like maybe my voice was better for Greatest Dancer. And what's interesting, too, is, again, like we were never really allowed to hear any of the songs until it was time to record them. So we would do the background on a track where I had not necessarily heard the lead to I Want Your Love. But, you know, I loved the arrangement. I loved the strings. I loved the track. But I wasn't worried about what they felt was better for us. In this case, Greatest Dancer. And now, you know, hindsight, I'm glad I didn't.
I listened to the album version of We Are Family a couple of days ago, the full fat cut.
By the way, I have my Fiorucci on today for Greatest Dancer.
Oh!
Just in case. Austin Gucci Fiorucci.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Just for the occasion.
I hadn't noticed. No, but in We Are Family is a great example of you going in with the world's hottest producers, and Sister Sledge have been kind of cold for a couple of years, and you needed a hit, and you sound so confident on that. You're kind of saying, come on, Bernard, play that bass, and you know, play that. You're really ad-libbing and feeling it, and you sound so strong and so confident.
Thank you. That if you knew the story behind that. First of all, I was not allowed to hear We Are Family until it was time to record it as the record. And that's what Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards believed in, the spontaneity of not sounding too rehearsed or over rehearsed. I get it. You know, back then I was like, well, I usually learn the songs, but cool. I did trust and respect them as producers. You know, they were coming off of their own hits, and I felt like, you know, these guys know what they're doing. But the background, the ad lib of We Are Family, I think that I can imagine. I think that was like done at 2 a.m. I remember being in, you know, behind the glass, and Nile Rodgers, Tony was there, Tony Thompson, Joni, my sister Kim. Debbie wasn't there for some reason. I think she was on maternity leave, but they were all there. And if you listen to the very end, I call out everyone who was standing behind that glass booth cheering me on because it was 2 a.m. and they were like, come on. They were like giving me this confidence. And I'm like, come on, Joni. Come on, Kim. And then I think I go, come on, Niles, which drives me because his name is Nile with no S. But, you know, I think there are some things I just don't remember, but there are some things that I remember like yesterday. And that was one of them during the ad lib. And we did it in one take. We did the ad lib in one take. I remember doing the ad lib, one track, and then saying, okay, I guess they want to do it again. And they were like, we got it. Now, of course, they spliced it and edited it and moved things around, but they felt, obviously, they heard as producers, they had enough of what they needed. And I get it.
When you heard the finished versions of He's the Greatest Dancer for the first time, or We Are Family, did you think, oh, we've got a number one?
No, it was the opposite. I was so used to having records here in the United States that I would record and tell my elementary school friends, I got a record coming out. I stopped telling my friends because they would be successful in other countries, but never would I hear them on the radio here. But I remember, and Nile and I to this day laugh about this. I was this goofy 15 at the time, going into 16 kid that would ask him like every other day, do you think they're going to play the record? And he had this confidence. He would exude this confidence, like, yeah, sure, you know. And he was a kid too, actually, when you think about it. They were like early 20s. But I would be like, you think they're going to play it? You think? And he would, you know, I think I probably got on his nerves, but he would say, yeah, they're going to play it. It's going to be huge. And he would say that as if he just knew. And I would say to myself, but they don't play our records. But I kid you not, I'll never forget the release date. It's the song that woke me up for school that day.
No.
It's the song that woke me up for school on the radio. I woke up and I sat up at the edge of the bed and I heard that guitar ding, 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 and I was like, that's our record. They're playing our record. They had never played our records. You know, our of course, again, over there in Europe and in the UK, they did all the time. But domestically, you know, I stopped telling my friends that I made music, really. You know, I would work a lot, go overseas on the weekends. I always feel like the person who created Hannah Montana really saw my life. And they would, you know, I would literally go to school, get my studies done, come home on the weekends, get on a flight, go to England and be this star with my sisters, and then get back on the bus, get on the plane, get back on the bus, go to school, and don't talk about it. Because, you know, I either came off like I was, you know, you'd be with your girlfriends. What did you do? Oh, I went bowling. Oh, I went to the movies. I went to the mall. And I go, I was in Japan. So, you know, I learned very early on, just say I had to work. And that worked for me.
I totally get that.
Yeah, I would go, oh, I had to work. And they never asked what you know, they knew I sang, but they wouldn't go, where'd you go? And so that I didn't realize, and more than ever now, it really gave me a huge respect for balance. One is your life and one is your work.
Sure.
And your life comes first.
For us, you were the soundtrack of our lives. You know, the first tune I bought was Mama Never Told Me, and I was 13. And all through my teens and my 20s, you sisters were there having hits that were, and your American audience might not realize this, but the hits from the 70s were re-released in the 80s and were all hits again. And then they were remixed and revamped again and were hits again in the 90s, which is amazing.
That's so true. Sure is pure. We are family. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're so right about that. That goes to show. I always say, you know, that song, it's been the backdrop of my life too. And I always say it's going to be here when I'm long gone. I just feel like it has such a life. I'm sure you know it was added to the Library of Congress here in the United States. So it's up there with the Martin Luther King speech. And I'm like, wow, this song, We Are Family, it means so much to me more than ever now. Yeah. And to be the voice on that is everything.
Yeah, And it will never, ever grow old, that song. Tell us a little bit about Family Room. I was going to give it a plug anyway, but now you've mentioned it, I know I've been on it a couple of times, and I love my experience in the Family Room. But for those who've not seen it, tell us a little bit about it.
Well, first of all, Alex, I have to say the Family Room loves you. They love whenever you visit us. You are a global UK connection. Family Room is a global virtual room. And it was actually something Kristen and I, my daughter Kristen and I, we were shopping. We were just about to shop this mother-daughter talk show. And, you know, I had pitched the show about the next generation that the We Network here in the United States had picked up. But then some of the sisters decided one sister, Kim, didn't want her daughters to be in a show. And so I kind of went back to square one, and I said, well, let me put together a show with my daughter, because we have a nice chemistry, and we, you know, on the internet, we get a lot of followers that like, you know, our little post. And when the pandemic happened, Kristen was like, Mom, let's just do it within our four walls. Here's what's really interesting. I always have the saying, we plan while God laughs. And that is because We're Family is a major brand. I always say it's going to be here when I'm long gone. And if you go to wearefamily.com, now you can see some of the things we're doing with We Are Family and Family Room. But I thought, you know, mainly I was putting this together for branding purposes. I was so wrong, because what Family Room has become is a global community of support. And there's so many people who are quarantining alone. I get the warmest letters. I get people who tell me how this has really brought them through. I always say, for a lifetime, we may know our passion. My passion, obviously, is music. But sometimes it takes a lifetime to learn your purpose. And I'm beginning to understand the purpose, the real purpose of We Are Family and Family Room, and what a different meaning to my voice being a part of that. It's very powerful.
Now, I watch you on Instagram Live. Is that the only way you can watch it, or are there other ways?
For now, it's Instagram Live, and now we're about to upload it on Facebook. Live is the only place you can see it live for now. But the good news is that we are now starting to talk to networks, hopefully over there too. But what's interesting is we've always had I have as an artist, a much wider market there in the UK. I still, you know, I headline and produce festivals there. Here in the United States, not as much, but what I am starting to see is that global community come together. And so because of that, we're starting to talk to networks here and networks there. And it's really worked for me. I mean, it's a terrible thing that's going on with this whole pandemic. It really is. But I think if there's some bright light in there, I've been told that Family Room has become that.
Kathy, there's so much more I want to ask you about, but we've run out of time. Would you come back and do this again one day?
I would love to. Don't get me started. This has been so much fun. It's very, in the comfort of my home, I feel like pulling up and having a cup of tea with you.
Well, maybe we can do that next time. And hopefully in between, we'll see you back out on stage soon.
Soon, yeah. It can't be soon enough, but I will be there. Can't wait.
We love you and thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.
Stars, Cars, Guitars was produced by Tom Stroud.